Hello and welcome to Polytoots. In this week's video, we're going to be finishing off the pumpkin that we started, and so we're going to be doing a texture, this texture to be specific, because I was smart and actually recorded this last instead of first like I did with the cupcake. So yeah, we're going to be making this, and we're also going to be throwing it into Unity at the end. We don't cover any export options. You can check out my overview videos for that. But yeah, if this is something that you're interested in, then by all means keep watching, otherwise just go away, I guess. Okay, so here we are, similar place to where we left off last time. The only difference is at the end of the last video, I think I was a bit confused as to what was happening with the back inner layer, and I was trying to sort of paint some stuff on it, and the confusion came because this was still enabled in the paint room, our sculpt, I mean. So yeah, I've just done a rebake, so it's basically the same as it was before, just minus the extra sort of stuff I doodled over it, trying to find out what was wrong. And so now we're basically ready to get started, and we don't really need any of the stuff that we baked from the sculpt. The ambient occlusion and the curvature obviously will still keep, and the normal map obviously we will still keep, but in terms of sort of color and gloss and whatnot, we really don't need any of these, but we're not going to delete them just yet, because they can prove a little bit handy just to kind of get started. So the first thing we want to do is kind of just decide our colors, and if you don't have a color palette window here, you can find it in sort of Windows pop-ups, color palette, and there's also color swatches, which I'm going to open, so I'll just put that somewhere here. And if you want to just make your own, just right click here and delete all. The cool thing about this color palette is, well, the cool and weird thing is this is basically a clone of what you do over here. So if I have this HLS1 selected and I hit OK, then that's what will appear over here. I don't quite understand why we can't have these additional 5 buttons also just over here. That would make life a little bit easier, but it is what it is. But yeah, you can also, if you want, just select your own image here, or the one really handy thing is you can actually just paste an image that you find from the internet, and everything you kind of put in here gets added to a list. So if you didn't know how to sort of clear this, like every time you open 3D Coat you end up with this same image, you can just click on this bit down here and just clear the images list. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is actually just as a base, maybe I'll find let's say an image that has like a nice color, so something like this, and I'll just click on something, just and I'm looking for a pretty bright orange, and if I'm happy with it, let's just hide these, and I'll create a new layer. I'll just call this pumpkin base. I'm just going to use this initially just to test out whatever colors I kind of want, and I'm going to hit the 2 key, so we're looking at it in full lit mode. So that's okay. I prefer something a little bit more orange, so I'm going to disregard using an image as reference. Instead, let's go back to an actual color picker. Let's try and find... Yeah, so that's kind of something more that I'm after, like a really sort of strong, bright, in-your-face orange. Yeah, so that's my primary done. And so I'll just add this by clicking this little green thing. So now I have that. And now let's find a sort of shadow or a low light color. And one thing I've learned from the amazing texture artist that works in the same studio I do is you shouldn't use like low and high values of the same color, because apparently life isn't monochromatic, and neither should your colors be. So like what I would normally do is I would just kind of have a darker shade of orange, and I'd use that as my shade, and then I'd have a lighter shade for the lighter bits. But again, apparently that's not the best idea. And so I can kind of use whatever shade I feel would complement the orange, and I'm going to go with kind of like a deep sort of purpley almost, but I don't want too much color here. So it's going to be pretty near black. Maybe something like that. We'll start with that. We'll see how it goes. And for my light color, I'm just going to hit the V key to grab this orange again. I kind of want this sort of on a yellowy spectrum, but not too far away from where we were. So something like that could work. So I'll just add that as well. And so there's our three colors: the primary, the shade, and the highlight. And so as a base, I guess, let's just cover this entire thing. In fact, to make life a little bit easier, I'll ignore back faces. You could also just use the fill tool to fill the layer, but I don't know, I find texturing kind of therapeutic, so I kind of just prefer to draw it in. Unless it was absolutely massive, in which case, you know, I have my limits, and then I would use the fill tool. Okay, so there's the base color done. Alright, yeah, so I said before that we don't really need to use these layers in terms of sort of color and whatnot, but we do want to use some of the sort of, I'm not sure how to explain it really, like the pixel information that came across from the bake, because if you remember, nope, not the render window, not sculpt, hit the 5 key. Our pumpkin was made up of certain bits, so we had the inside, that was a separate piece, the pumpkin itself was separate, and you know, the lid and the stem. And so we can actually use this information to freeze things in the paint room. And let's just hide that sculpt again. And so what I want to do here is I need to make this area kind of black, or rather my sort of shade color. So if I had, let's say, layer 9, which will eventually be my emissive, so I'll call that emissive. If I were to just try and do it like this, then I'm going to end up painting over it. Now, you know, I'll have to be pretty precise with it, and that's just going to take too long. So what we can do is actually just select the back innard layer, and right click and freeze the painted pixels, or actually that's the wrong one, we want to freeze the transparent pixels. Freeze transparent pixels. Oh no, okay, sorry, yeah, because this baked really weirdly, so we don't actually need that at all. So let's go back to the pumpkin, which we know is that, and so for this one, let's freeze the painted pixels. So now we can paint wherever we want, and it won't paint on the actual pumpkin itself. So we can come back up to our emissive and just do it like this. So that's, you know, a lot easier than having to sort of manually kind of paint around. Yeah, and that's why it's not always a good idea to discard your bake layers immediately, because, you know, there is other information there that you can kind of make use of. So hit Control D to deselect that, same as in Photoshop. Okay, so now we have this and that, and for my curvature map, I've set it to modulate 2 times, and I've set it to 50%. So I'll just hit the 2 key here to look at this flat shaded. So let's revert this back to what it was. So you would get it as a standard, and it would be hidden. But my ambient occlusion isn't particularly strong, which is completely fine. Like I don't really like super strong AOs anyway. But for the most part, I'm going to be painting this in this sort of full lit mode, or, you know, so it's rather flat shaded. So I've hit the 5 key, so I don't want to be painting in this mode too much. So I'm going to be in this one. And the reason that I'd set my curvature to a modulate is just to kind of help me kind of see what is out, what is in a little bit, rather than looking at it, you know, like almost sort of flat. and I brought it down to 50% just because I thought it was a little too strong. Eventually, we probably might not even need this map at all at the end. For now, it's just kind of there as a guide to help me know what's what. Yeah, so let's actually start doing some more stuff. And it looks actually like I may have missed a little bit there. I'll just fix that up without doing the freezing of the mask. Okay, so the next thing I kind of want to do is this line that runs all across here. I want to make that stand out a bit more, and should also be the same color as what we're going to use for the emissive. But for starters, I am going to give this its own layer, only because I might merge it later with the emissive, but I might not. So for now, I'm going to keep it separate, and I'll just call this something like lid line. I'll call it dark lid line. And what we can do is we can come to either say the pumpkin or the lid. And so freeze transparent pixels. And so now we still have to be a bit careful, but it is going to make our lives a little bit easier, because if we had, let's just Control D that, if we had just everything kind of be paintable, then I'd really kind of have to go around here and watch my strokes, which is fine. Like, you can do it this way. It's only going to take you, you know, a few minutes to kind of just trace around the whole thing. But if you were looking to save, you know, a minute or two, then you can make your life a little bit easier. Because now we can increase our brush size a bit, and we can kind of just do something more like this. So, I mean, it's arguably not actually any quicker, but I find it's a little bit more accurate. So, you know, I don't have to worry too much about painting it wrong on one side. I can only be wrong on one side. I can't be wrong on both. So, yeah, in terms of time, I guess it's probably very similar. So, yeah, I'm just going to go around this whole thing. So I'll speed the video up for that. Okay, so that'll do. Something's looking a little strange here. Maybe maybe my orange isn't. I didn't paint it with enough force, enough gusto. So let's hide these just to make sure that we are looking at a completely flat map. It seems okay now. Yeah, so I'm using this brush, well, the brush mode rather. So the opacity is kind of dependent on my pen pressure, which is pretty nice for sort of early stage stuff, but it does mean that if you are trying to cover something in the same color, you should be pressing down hard to give it full opacity or full strength. I think I may have just accidentally not done that, but yeah, so that's fine now. Yeah, so let's have a look at the highlights. So we're going to go around again and just kind of give this a little bit of an oomph. So I have the dark line lid, so let's make this the light line lid. And we're going to just do the inverse of what we were doing before. So we'll freeze the lid itself, and then we can kind of just go around and make this a little bit light. So again, I'll just sort of speed through this. Oh, actually no, if you wanted not to have like this pressure be based on opacity, then you just switch the brush to this mode. So now it doesn't matter how hard or soft you press, it's always going to be 100%. So that's going to help a little bit for this stuff. But anyway, yeah, back to speeding it up. So that'll do. It looks a little weird now, I know, but should all be fine and dandy toward the end. I still keep thinking that this is not as saturated as the top bit, but I think it's just my eyes playing tricks on me. Or it could be something to do with the curvature, probably. Yeah, but as I say, it's there just as sort of a base, so we might not use it later. So yeah, we've done some some initial stuff. It's not the tidiest, to be honest. We probably want to actually make that quite a lot thinner. So yeah, let me just fix this up a little bit and then I'll be back. So let's move on to the whole base. And I think for now I probably don't actually need any of these layers that we were using before from the bake, but I'm going to keep them just in case, you know, just in case we need to do any more freezing and whatnot. But for now, let's just kind of work on the pumpkin itself. And I'm not going to be doing this in separate layers, like the whole shading and highlights. I'm just going to do that all on one layer. So yeah, we have our shade color, and I'll change this back to this brush, and we probably want to start with something pretty soft. Eventually we will harden it out, but yeah, so we want to start with something a bit soft. And let's enable our symmetry just to make life a little bit easier. And we do have 12 sides, so we want to make sure it's radial symmetry, and 12 is a magic number. So let's just try and get some of this done. Okay, now onto the highlights. And pretty much just the same again. I'll try and sort of do this at first along kind of the whole thing, but then primarily I just want it kind of down the middle. But for now, I'll kind of just coat everything a little bit. Maybe get down our base color and just come along the sides a little bit here, just so the highlight kind of remains sort of centered, but we don't lose it completely from the edges. That's probably okay. So now let's get to work on going around like these eyes, and actually I'm probably going to use the same. So instead of light line lid, I'm just going to call this light line, and we will just kind of go along. Oh, I selected the wrong color. We will just go along the edges here. And yeah, okay, so because this is above our emissive, we need to be careful, but our emissive is only this, so we could, in theory, stick that layer on top, and so now I'm free to sort of paint wherever. Oh, and definitely want to turn symmetry off. Yeah, so let's just go over this. I mean, it's already pretty bright, but let's just give it a little bit of oomph. In fact, I might maybe if we push out the brightness a little bit more than I would usually do, we can come back in and kind of give it a bit of a dark edge as well. So where it's kind of bulging out, it'll be light, but we know kind of like in reality that it would kind of be going like inside the pumpkin as well, so you'd expect it to be a little bit darker there. It's a bit too much. So yeah, if I hold the control key, I can kind of just erase without having to swap tools, so pretty handy. So yeah, I'll just carry on with the rest of this, so I'll be back in a second. The only thing to kind of watch out for, let me just undo what I did there, is because we have this sort of fake 3D projection, it doesn't make sense to kind of do this outline across the actual silhouette of this teeth. It makes more sense to kind of assume what the front part would be, which is this line right here, because this area in here will be darkened once we kind of get to that stage. So yeah, something to keep in mind. I'll be back in a bit. that's okay for now. It's a little bit, it's missing some stuff. The main issue that we're going to sort of run into is I'm about to kind of do some stuff where we'll sort of introduce, let's change my brush type to this one. We'll introduce some sort of cracks and whatnot. I'll just get a light color. So we'll start introducing things like this, and that's kind of rubbish. It's going to really kind of contradict the like the blurry sort of soft kind of hand painted stuff that we have going on like the base of the pumpkin. But don't worry, we will eventually sort of sharpen this up. For the moment, it's kind of like the base is done. We'll use that as just like a general guide. Let me just undo this thing. Yeah, so you know, something to keep in mind. And again, following the same sort of logic in that this this dark line might become an emissive later. We'll actually sort of keep it for the cracks as well. So let's get. I'm going to hit X on my keyboard to swap these colors around. I don't know if that is the default hotkey, but if you're very accurate, not as accurate as I'm being with your mouse, you can, I mean, that's really annoying. You can kind of get this one where it says to swap colors, and then if you press the, I think it's the end key on your keyboard to define a hotkey. This one doesn't say end, it says backspace, because there's already a hotkey assigned, so backspace will just delete it. Then yeah, you can assign whatever hotkey you want, obviously. Oh, for a moment there I thought my microphone was off. That would have been terrible. We're like half an hour in, but we're good, we're good. Yeah, so I've hit X, and I'm going to just take my shade color as one, and then make sure that my highlight color is the other, so save ourselves a little bit of time. We are going to have to bounce back and forth between layers, but that'll be alright, it'll be fine. So we'll start with just these sort of cracks, which admittedly don't make too much sense, but they look cool. I mean, you could sort of kind of imagine that whoever was sort of carving this pumpkin just was making mistakes every now and again. Not the kind of mistakes that I'm going to paint in, but you'll see what I mean. It's kind of deciding like what looks cool versus what would actually be real, and I think they look a lot cool, so I'm willing to ignore the fact that whoever was cutting this pumpkin wouldn't have made a mistake like that, but it is what it is. So let's just yeah, let's just paint some of these in. So again, you kind of don't need to see me do every single one of them, so I'll just speed through again and just paint all of the dark lines. Okay, so I may have gone a bit overboard with all the cuts on the front. I won't continue them, you know, all the way around. I'll add in a couple more here, but then I'll probably do the rest sort of off screen, because there's no point in me just sitting here and doing this. You're not learning anything from that. So yeah, I'll just do a couple around here, and then we can move on to the highlights. Okay, so that will do for that. Now we'll come down to our light line, and basically I didn't need to choose the color. That was the whole point of doing the swapping colors. Oh well, anyway, so we'll swap to our light line color, and yeah, again, just going to sort of speed through this. Just going to kind of draw along one side of this, and because we have sort of these things going sort of around the mesh, I'm going to assume that kind of my light angle is kind of, you know, coming from pretty much straight on, so anything kind of on the right hand side will be highlighted on the right side, and anything on the left side will be highlighted on the left side. So yeah, Makes sense. I think I might have actually run into a little bit of a problem. My highlight, of course, probably needs to be a bit higher than the actual sort of the highlight that we're using for the pumpkin base. So yeah, that almost looks like a different color that we were using here. For some reason it's not here. A little bit strange. So I'll just get rid of this one. Not sure what's going on there really. The highlight should be kind of a yellowy, but we seem to have ended up with kind of an orange. Fair enough. So let's just go over these real quick, and then we'll go back to doing it. Kind of should be it. Yeah, you'd have thought, like, you know, this teeth area would be kind of riddled with these sort of scars and whatnot. But I think, you know, what we have from the sculpt, it's kind of gnarly enough that if we just start trying to sort of add in too many other things, it might kind of look a bit messy. Maybe we can try and sort of just boost it a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, kind of like to... I think that it's kind of enough as it is, although it could be cool to have a pretty... Let's see what that looks like actually. We'll see if we can get away with having like a giant one that kind of just comes from, say, here. So yeah, I guess it's okay. If I don't like it later, I'll just remove it. So let's move on to, I guess, the stem. We still need to sharpen up all of this and add in some other sort of little details, but yeah, let's just go to the stem, and I think pretty much this will just be its own layer. Like, I'll do everything in one layer, I think, because we don't need to worry about emissive stuff or anything. In fact, while we're here, let's just actually... Oops. I thought you could multi-select layers now in 3D Coat, but I guess you can't do it in the paint room. Fair enough. So we're going to just delete those baked layers. So those this... Oh, that's a baked layer as well, so we get rid of that. Yeah, so we have our stem, and let's try and find a suitable green. That might be a little too... I don't know, kind of works. Yeah, tough to say. Let's just go with this one. We can always tweak it later. In fact, a lot of kind of what I do is like as a sort of final pass, I'll tend to sort of bring it all into Photoshop and just mess with like the levels a bit, make some things pop or make some things stand out, or if something's too strong, bring it down. Because it's just easier to do that in sort of Photoshop on a global scale, I suppose. There are ways to kind of do it here. You have sort of these tool options for say like saturate or something, and if I come to the pumpkin base, but you don't really have much control, you know. It's not like you're doing it over sliders or curves or anything. It's just kind of dependent on your brush. So yeah, I prefer to kind of just do that in Photoshop rather than with a brush. But yeah, so what was I doing again? Oh yeah, the stem. So yeah, we kind of got some nice shapes, I suppose, colors, whatever you call them. So we'll just kind of make those pop out of it. So let's kind of just get like a dark sort of muddy brown. Oh, actually, before I do that, let's just grab whatever color that was, just in case. So we'll keep that one as a swatch. And let's get some sort of darkish brown. Oh, I'm doing this all on the pumpkin base, so whoops-a-daisy. It doesn't matter though, the stem will always be above it, so yeah, that's fine. So with brown. And again, I'm going to kind of change my brush style over to this one. And maybe we could go ahead and actually just go straight to this sort of hardened brush, which we're eventually going to use on the pumpkin base. But so the difference being, of course, if I were to do sort of light strokes, even though it's, you know, the actual strokes themselves are kind of soft, it has a very sort of hard edge, I suppose, as opposed to using something like this where it's very soft. And soft is usually safe, you know, like it's sort of easy to texture things softly, but it's really kind of hard to do kind of hard edge stuff. And don't get me wrong, I am not the best at it. I'm not the best at it, apparently not the best at speaking either, but you know, we'll try. So this is my shade, and we're kind of just gonna do some stuff. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not, I don't know. We'll speed through and we'll see what it looks like at the end. Okay, maybe have gone completely off the rails with the stem, but that'll do. So now let's just work on sort of tidying up the base of it. And so we get our, let's see, the primary, and that's weird. Looks like we've lost some colors. Oh no, I'm being stupid. So our primary and our highlight. Okay. That'll be, actually no, sorry, we'll start with the low light and make sure we're on this hard brush. And again, I'm going to switch over to this tool, but it will be sort of hard strokes. And I'm going to start with kind of like a big one to kind of go down sort of at quite a kind of large angle, a wide radius rather. And then I'll kind of bring it in and go down and bring it in and go down. And basically just kind of continue that. The idea of what I'm doing is I'll kind of keep coming in and doing like the highlights sort of where they kind of should be. Especially down sort of the center, be sort of strongest on sort of these areas, and then I'll kind of rein both of these in with the primary color again. So I kind of just keep kind of going over, and because I'm only applying sort of these light strokes, it's kind of it's both sharpening a bit, but also like not completely kind of overpowering what is there. So we kind of should end up with you know, like a stepped sort of shading, I suppose, possibly. Not sure what I've done here. A bit strange. Oh well. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and this, you know, it takes a little while for it to start looking good. So we'll just kind of keep doing it, basically. The only other thing to kind of keep in mind is like these grooves at the moment, they kind of have a consistent level of darkness. You'd expect it to be sort of darker kind of up here and where it really kind of pinches in, But areas where it tends to sort of bulge out a bit more, you do kind of want to try to sort of lessen that effect ever so slightly. Like, you still obviously want it there, but not to be as strong as where everything kind of pinches in. Yeah, so that'll do. It's not a very obvious change, but just kind of helps break it up a little bit. So I think I will actually merge that in with the base, if I can. It's one of these. Shift the layer down, merge layer. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the last thing we're going to do is just create a new layer. As long as it's above the pumpkin base, it doesn't really matter. So I'll just call this one unique, which is ironic because it's an incredibly generic name to give a layer. And we're going to come in and basically grab our highlight color, but we're going to use something a bit brighter. And then using like a teeny tiny brush, maybe just kind of go around. That might be too small. Okay, so yeah, just introduce some, I don't really know what it would be. You know, I'm not aiming for like scratches or anything, but it's sort of like a bit of extra weathering. Doing sort of lines or dots on things kind of just helps kind of break it up. So we'll start with just doing some lines, and then afterwards we'll do some dots. So yeah, I will be back in a minute. Yeah, that's okay. And then maybe if we wanted to kind of make this all a little bit subtle, we could try and do some sort of multiply is probably not what we want. Maybe like a lighten. Oh no, because then we're going to lose the dark. Yeah, okay, so maybe just standard blend, but we'll just reduce the opacity a bit. Maybe by half or something. So yeah, that's okay. Not overly impressed with my stem, but everything else seems okay. So, unless I'm forgetting something. I don't think I'm forgetting something. So I think we're done for the texturing. So let's just kind of throw this into Unity, and we'll see, you know, what the sort of emissive stuff is doing. And if you don't know how to kind of export everything out into Unity, I did do a video on that in my overview. You can just sort of check it out rather than me adding, you know, an extra sort of 10 minutes onto this one. Actually, I tell a lie. The first thing we're going to do before, as I was saying before, to kind of use Photoshop to kind of just adjust some levels and whatnot. So I'm going to hit Control P on the keyboard, or it's, I believe, somewhere up here. Edit all layers in external editor. Yeah, so Control P is the hotkey, and this will open up Photoshop. And then from here, just disable the normal map, and let's just grab the pumpkin base because this is kind of the bulk of it. And let's see if we can kind of play with the colors or anything. So yeah, we'll save this just Control S, and then we will hop back into coat. And then from here, let it kind of just do its thing. There we go. Bada bing, bada boom. Yeah, okay, so now we will roll on over to, wait a minute. No, we won't. I knew I was forgetting something. Yeah, it's kind of optional for me, but just in case it's sort of not obvious, I'm going to hit 5 on the keyboard here. And obviously we don't have any sort of spec or anything, so I've been texturing this kind of with the intention of it being kind of in a, like it itself would be self-lit rather than lit by the environment. But yeah, even if you're kind of doing all of this, you could just come in here. I'll put my normal map on. Just make a new layer. Let's say, just call it well, spec or gloss or whatever it is. And then disable your color, enable your spec. Let's put this up to say, I don't know, 60% or something. And then rather than just kind of like coating over the whole thing, let's try and see if there's just like a rough kind of alpha that we can kind of just give this thing quickly. Maybe anything a little more sparse. Okay, maybe this could work if we just do it small, and then it's, I mean, it's obviously it's a bit too strong, but we'll tone that down afterwards. Always better to go too far than not too far. You know what I mean. Okay, so I've just hit 3 on the keyboard, just to kind of make sure I don't have any blank spots. And you can kind of see, you know, everything's sort of just repeating quite kind of horribly. But because it's just a spec, it won't really matter too much. So let's just get some of this up here. Yeah, and it should be fine. I mean, obviously I should sort of mention that if you're doing this yourself as some sort of portfolio asset, then of course, you know, take your time with it. That's my face, right? 2, 3, yeah. So make sure we don't do the eyes or anything. Although this will kind of get blown out by an emissive, so it's not like we would ever actually see it. But if you just wanted to kind of not have it appear here, then just hold Control or grab the eraser and undo it. But yeah, if we do, we will. But when we put the emissive on, the spec won't matter. But I was saying before about, you know, it'd be nice to have some of these without emissive. So you kind of wouldn't really want to have them. Let's change brush. Wouldn't really want to have them in these gaps. Yes, I'll just fix this up a little bit, and then I swear, honest to God, we are going over to Unity. In fact, actually, I'm being a bit stupid. One thing we can just do is select our dark line and freeze transparent pixels. And now we can kind of just erase globally. So I'll just grab the erase tool. And we're on our spec layer, so let's just kind of go around. We can hit the 3 key just to make sure that we are actually getting rid of it. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, yeah, job is a good one. So Control D to come out of that. And yeah, let's go see what this looks like in Engine. Okay, I have told a bit of another big fat lie. Obviously this isn't Unity, and the reason that we're not in Unity right now is because I realized it's not just a case of sort of exporting the maps and then hopping over to Unity, and obviously exporting the model as well. We're doing stuff with the emissive, so I've just hit Control P in 3D Coat to bring in my layers sort of as is, and basically let's just make like a black layer here, and we're going to grab let's see, the emissive, so we don't want spec, we definitely don't want ambient occlusion or curvature, we don't need the stem, don't even need the light line, so it's just the emissive and the dark line. So for now I'm just going to merge them. The only reason I'm doing this is I'm not going to save this document. I'll save the image, but I won't save the document. So This is dark line, and then we'll just change the color. If I go to hit colorize, and obviously you can have whatever emissive you want. In fact, maybe don't quote me on this, but I think if you were to just provide Unity with a white emissive, you can change the color yourself, but I can't remember if that's true or not, if I'm thinking of some other engine, so yeah, don't quote me on that. So let's just find something pretty sort of hot. And so yeah, this is the texture that we will save out as the emissive. So yeah, here's the final result, and we have like some light leaks from the bloom, which is pretty cool. Oh, and what I was saying earlier about, you know, if you were to just put in like a map and then choose a color, yeah, I was right about that. You can just specify whatever color you want. And the reason that my bloom is kind of actually, you know, it is sort of proper bloom, is because I am using Unity's post-processing script, and that just has bloom enabled. So without the bloom, this would just be kind of, it's still full lit, like it won't take any kind of lighting information, but yeah, it's still not as good as just putting on a bit of bloom. In fact, maybe my light is also, you know, if this was sort of nighttime, doesn't really seem to make any difference. Fair enough. Yeah, so that's kind of it. This is what it looks like in Unity. We can kind of make it a bit spooky. Yeah, so thank you for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions or requests or whatever it is, anything, let me know. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.